"She's gone, David," Marcus said, his voice flat in the echoing hall of the estate. David, the newly crowned alpha, didn't turn from the tall arched window overlooking the rain-slicked grounds. His jaw clenched tight enough to ache. People don't just vanish, Marcus. Not on the night of the ascension, not without a trace. Her room is empty. The guards saw nothing. Marcus paused, the silence heavy with the unspoken reality. "And Lady Elena is waiting in the parlor." David finally turned, his eyes dark and stormy. He had made his choice tonight, choosing duty and alliance over the quiet, steadfast girl who had always been there. He had chosen his mistress, his queen in waiting. But as he looked at the empty doorway where Luna should have been, a cold realization settled in his chest. He had won the crown, but the quiet center of his world had just disappeared. 4 years. It was a substantial amount of time. Yet in the grand, immortal stretch of a wolf's life, it should have been nothing but a blink. For David, however, it felt like an agonizing crawl through a desolate landscape. He sat at the head of the long oak table, the polished surface reflecting the flickering chandelier light. Around him, the council members debated trade agreements and border disputes, their voices blending into a dull roar. He ran a hand over his face, masking his exhaustion. Elena sat to his right, her posture perfect, her emerald silk gown catching the light. She was everything an alpha's mate should be. Politically astute, fiercely loyal to their pack, and unyieldingly pragmatic. They functioned flawlessly as a unit, a machine designed for leadership. Yet, the empty seat at the far end of the table, the seat traditionally held by the alpha's most trusted confidant, remained vacant. No one dared sit there. No one dared mention her. Alpha David. Silas, the elder of the Northern Territory, spoke, drawing his attention. "The issue of the rogue incursions near the Whispering Woods needs immediate address. They are growing bolder." David straightened, forcing his mind back to the present. "We increase patrols. Send Marcus with a detail to reinforce the northern border. I want a report by tomorrow evening." "There is something else," Silas added, his rheumy eyes studying David carefully. "A new pack has established a settlement just beyond the eastern ridge. They claim neutral territory, but their presence is unsettling." "A new pack?" Elena intervened, her brow furrowed. "That land has been barren for decades. Who is leading them?" "They call themselves the Cinder Crest," Silas replied. "Their alpha is reclusive. We only deal with an emissary, a woman who is remarkably adept at negotiations." David felt a strange, inexplicable pull in his chest. A prickle of awareness, like the static before a thunderstorm. An emissary? Yes. She secured the water rights to the Silver River last week without yielding a single acre of their claimed land. Silas chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. "She is formidable, quiet but sharp. The description shouldn't have meant anything." Yet, the air in the room suddenly felt suffocatingly tight. David stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. The council fell silent. "Set up a meeting," David commanded, his voice tight. "I want to meet this emissary." Elena placed a hand on his arm. "David, is that necessary? We can send a diplomatic envoy." He pulled his arm away, perhaps a fraction too quickly. "No, I will handle this." He strode out of the council chamber, needing the cool night air. The estate gardens were quiet, the scent of blooming night jasmine heavy in the air. But underneath it, faint and almost imagined, he thought he caught a trace of pine and rain, a scent he hadn't smelled in 4 years. He shook his head, chastising himself for the foolish hope. Luna was gone. She had taken his rejection, his choice of Elena, and disappeared without a word, leaving only a folded silver necklace on her vanity. He touched his chest, feeling the familiar weight of the chain beneath his shirt. He had spent the first years searching relentlessly, tearing through neighboring packs and rogue camps, but she had vanished perfectly, as if she had never existed. Now, a new pack, a quiet, formidable emissary. It was a desperate leap of logic, a fool's hope. But as he looked out toward the eastern ridge, silhouetted against the moonlight, he knew he had to know. He wouldn't find peace until he saw her face. The meeting point was an old stone bridge crossing the Silver River, a natural border between their territories. The morning was crisp, the mist clinging to the rushing water below. David stood with Marcus and 2 guards, the tension rolling off him in waves. He had insisted on a small detail, wanting to keep the encounter as low-key as possible. Across the bridge, 3 figures emerged from the tree line. 2 large, imposing wolves flanked a slender woman, wrapped in a heavy, dark green cloak. The hood was pulled low, obscuring her features, but the way she walked, graceful, deliberate, making no unnecessary sound, sent a jolt of electricity straight to David's core. As they reached the center of the bridge, the 2 groups stopped, a respectful distance apart. The river roared beneath them, filling the silence. "Alpha, David," the woman spoke. Her voice was calm, melodic, yet carrying a weight of authority that hadn't been there before. It was her. David's breath hitched. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. 4 years of anger, sorrow, and desperate searching culminated in this single moment. She reached up and slowly pushed the hood back. Luna looked different. The softness of her youth had been replaced by sharp, defined features. Her eyes, once warm and yielding, were now guarded, holding a quiet strength that dared him to challenge her. She wore no pack markings, only simple, practical leather armor beneath the cloak. "Luna," Marcus whispered beside him, shock evident in his tone. "It is Emissary Luna now," she corrected softly, her gaze locked on David. There was no hatred in her eyes, no lingering sorrow, just a terrifying, hollow neutrality. "You're alive?" David finally managed to say, the words tasting like ash. You joined another pack." "I found a family," she replied evenly. "And I am here to negotiate the boundaries of our territory, Alpha David." He flinched at the formal title. "Luna, where have you been? Why did you run?" "I didn't run," she said, her chin lifting slightly. "I left. There was no place for me here after the ascension. You made your choice." "I searched for you," he insisted, taking a step forward. Her guards immediately tensed, shifting their stances. Luna raised a hand, stopping them. "Your search is over. I am here. Now, can we discuss the Eastern Ridge?" David felt a surge of frustration. She was standing right in front of him, yet she felt further away than when she was missing. The quiet, devoted girl who used to mend his wounds and listen to his fears was gone, replaced by this cold, efficient negotiator. "Why are you here, Luna?" he asked, his voice dropping in volume. "Of all the places in the world, why settle so close to my territory?" A flicker of something, hesitation, pain, crossed her features before she masked it. "The Cinder Crest Pact chose the land. I merely negotiated for it. We want peace, David. We want to be left alone. You expect me to just pretend the last 4 years didn't happen?" I expect you to act like the alpha you fought so hard to become, she countered, her words carrying a sting. Focus on your pack. Focus on your mate. The mention of Elena felt like a physical blow. He saw her eyes drop briefly to the silver chain peeking from his collar, and for a split second, the air between them crackled with unresolved history. "We will review your boundary proposals," David said finally, forcing a coldness into his tone he didn't feel. "Marcus will handle the details." He turned and walked away before he could do something foolish, like pull her into his arms and beg her to explain. As he retreated, he felt her eyes on his back, a heavy, silent presence that promised this was only the beginning. The return to the estate was suffocating. David locked himself in his study, the map of the territories spread out before him. The eastern ridge, previously a blank spot on the parchment, now glowed like a beacon. The Cinder Crest pack, Luna's pack. He poured himself a glass of amber liquid, the burn grounding him. He replayed the meeting over and over. Her composure, her guarded eyes, the subtle shift in her scent. It was still pine and rain, but sharper now, laced with something wild and unfamiliar. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Elena entered without waiting for a response, her expression unreadable. "Marcus told me," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. He said it was her. Luna. David didn't look up from the map. "Yes." Elena walked over to the desk, her fingers brushing the edge of the parchment. "You seem unsettled." "She's alive, Elena. She's an emissary for a new pack camped on our doorstep. How should I feel?" "You should feel relieved," Elena stated practically. "Your guilt over her disappearance can finally rest. She made her choice." "She said I made mine," David corrected, the memory of her words stinging anew. Elena sighed, a sound of practiced patience. "You did what was necessary for the pack. We both did. She wasn't suited for the life of an alpha's mate. She was too soft, too quiet." David's grip on the glass tightened until his knuckles turned white. "She wasn't soft. She was strong in ways you couldn't understand." The silence in the room grew heavy, the unspoken tension vibrating between them. Elena was his mate in name and strategy, but the bond that should have tethered their souls had never fully formed. It was a functional alliance, a political necessity. "Are you going to let her presence disrupt us, David?" Elena asked, her voice dangerously calm. "Because if you are, I need to know." "No," he lied, finally looking at her. "It changes nothing." But it changed everything. Later that night, unable to sleep, David found himself walking the halls of the estate. His feet carried him unconsciously toward the west wing, toward the room that had been kept locked and untouched for 4 years. He paused outside the heavy oak door. He shouldn't go in. It was a shrine to a ghost he needed to lay to rest. But his hand reached for the handle, turning it with a soft click. The room smelled faintly of dust, but beneath it, the lingering scent of her was still there. Her books were neatly stacked on the desk, her favorite knitted throw draped over the reading chair. It was exactly as she had left it the night of the ascension. He walked over to the small vanity. This was where she had left the silver necklace, the one he had given her when they were just pups. It was a symbol of his promise to protect her. A promise he had broken. He opened the top drawer, intending to close it quickly, but something caught his eye. Hidden beneath a stack of old letters was a small, leather-bound journal. He had never seen it before. His heart hammered against his ribs as he pulled it out. The leather was worn, the pages slightly yellowed. He opened it to the first page. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. Elegant, flowing, and precise. He turned the pages, reading her thoughts, her fears, her quiet observations of the pack. She wrote about him, about their friendship, and the slow, agonizing realization that he was pulling away as the pressure of the Alpha title loomed. Then, he reached the final entry. It was dated the day of the ascension. He has made his choice. I saw it in his eyes when he looked at Elena. It is the logical choice, the strong choice. I cannot hate him for it. But I cannot stay and watch him build a life that I was supposed to share. My body betrays me. The sickness, I thought, was just stress. The healer confirmed it today. David's breath stopped. The words blurred before his eyes. He forced himself to read the final line. I am leaving. Not just for my sanity, but for the life growing inside me. He needs a strong Alpha, not a weak, rejected Luna. I will disappear. It is the only way to protect our child. The journal slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a dull thud. A child. Luna hadn't just vanished because of a broken heart. She had vanished to protect his child. And for 4 years, he had been completely, blissfully unaware. The air in the room vanished, leaving him gasping in the suffocating silence of his own making. The dull thud of the journal hitting the floorboards seemed to echo in the silent room for hours. David remained paralyzed, the air trapped in his lungs burning. A child. His child. The revelation tore through the carefully constructed reality he had maintained for 4 years, shredding the narrative that Luna had simply left because she could not bear to see him with Elena. She had left to protect a life he hadn't even known he had helped create. He sank to his knees, his hands trembling as he carefully picked up the worn leather book. He traced the faded ink of her final entry. The magnitude of her sacrifice pressed down on him, a physical weight that threatened to crack his ribs. While he had been securing alliances, managing borders, and playing the dutiful mate to a woman he respected but did not love, Luna had been navigating pregnancy, childbirth, and survival in the wilderness. Completely alone. The first light of dawn began to creep through the heavy velvet curtains, casting long gray shadows across the room. David didn't remember standing, nor did he remember walking back to his own chambers. When he finally emerged for the morning meal, his face was a mask of cold, unyielding stone. Elena was already seated at the polished mahogany table, sipping tea from a delicate porcelain cup. She looked up as he entered, her sharp eyes immediately cataloging the dark circles beneath his eyes and the rigid set of his shoulders. "You look as though you haven't slept, David," she observed, her tone polite but probing. "Is the matter of the new pack still troubling you?" "It is a complex situation," David replied, his voice rough. He poured himself black coffee, ignoring the lavish spread of food. Their proximity requires careful handling. "Marcus is more than capable of managing the border negotiations," Elena said smoothly. She set her cup down, the clink loud in the quiet dining hall. "Unless there is another reason you are so deeply invested in this particular emissary?" David met her gaze. For the first time in their 4-year union, he felt a genuine spike of resentment toward her. It was irrational. She had done nothing wrong. She was merely playing the role they had both agreed to. But sitting across from her, harboring the secret of his hidden child, the emotional chasm between them felt insurmountable. "My investment is in the security of this pack," he stated flatly. He stood, leaving his coffee untouched. "I am riding out to the eastern ridge. I need to inspect the terrain myself." Before she could protest, He was gone. He saddled his horse himself, bypassing his usual guard to detail. He rode hard, the wind whipping past him, desperately trying to outpace the storm of guilt and desperation raging in his mind. He didn't go to the bridge. Instead, he tracked the faint scents along the tree line until he reached the outer boundary markers of the Cindercrest territory. He barely had time to dismount before 3 massive wolves emerged from the dense undergrowth, their teeth bared, low growls vibrating in their chests. "I need to speak with your emissary," David demanded, holding his ground. Now, the wolves didn't move. A long, tense moment passed before the brush parted further, and Luna stepped into the clearing. She was out of her formal cloak, wearing worn leather and a simple linen shirt. Her hair was tied back, and there was a smudge of dirt on her cheek. She looked breathtakingly real. "Alpha David," she said, her voice devoid of welcome. "You are trespassing on neutral ground." "I found your journal," he said. There was no preamble, no polite negotiation. The words tore out of him. Luna froze. The subtle shifting of her stance was the only indication that his words had landed. Her eyes darted briefly to the guards flanking her, then back to him. The neutral mask she wore slipped, just for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of absolute terror. "That was private property," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "A child, Luna." He took a step forward, his voice cracking. The wolves growled louder, but he ignored them. "You hid my child from me for 4 years?" "I protected my child," she corrected, the terror instantly replaced by a fierce maternal fury. "From a life where they would always be second, from a court that would view them as a political complication. I would have cared for you both. You know I would have." "As what, David?" she challenged, stepping closer to the boundary line but not crossing it. "As your hidden mistake? As the bastard offspring of the Alpha, while your chosen mate ruled by your side? No. He deserved better than the scraps of your affection. He, a son." David squeezed his eyes shut, the confirmation hitting him like a physical blow. "I want to see him." "No." The word was final, an iron gate slamming shut between them. "You forfeited that right the night you chose the crown over us. Go back to your estate, Alpha. We have nothing more to discuss." She turned her back on him and disappeared into the forest, leaving David standing alone at the edge of a territory he could not cross, separated from a family he had never known he possessed. The atmosphere in the council chamber was thick with tension. 3 days had passed since David's confrontation at the border, and the simmering hostility between the packs was suddenly overshadowed by a much darker threat. Silas stood at the map table, pointing a gnarled finger at a cluster of red markers near the Silver River. "The rogue incursions are no longer random skirmishes. They are organized. Last night, they attacked a supply caravan traveling along the neutral zone. 3 dead." Elena leaned forward, her emerald eyes sharp. "If they are operating in the neutral zone, they are a threat to both our borders. But we cannot send a full battalion without provoking Cindercrest. We don't provoke them. We ally with them," David stated, his voice carrying an authority that brooked no argument. He placed his hands on the table, leaning over the map. "The rogues are exploiting the gap in our defenses. We need a joint task force stationed at the river, immediately." Marcus, standing near the door, shifted uncomfortably. "Alpha, the Cindercrest pack is incredibly insular. They may view a joint camp as an occupation." "Then I will convince their emissary myself," David replied. "Draft the proposal, Marcus. We ride out at dusk." Elena watched him closely as the council dispersed. When they were alone, she walked slowly to his side of the table. "You are using this crisis," she said softly. To force your way into her life. I am securing our borders, David replied, not looking up from the map. Don't lie to me, David. Elena's voice held a dangerous edge. Ever since she returned, you have been erratic, distracted. If this is about unresolved guilt, you need to bury it. A leader cannot afford to be compromised by ghosts. This is not about ghosts, Elena. It is about survival. It was a half-truth, but it was the best he could offer. He couldn't tell her about the boy. The political fallout would be catastrophic, and worse, it would put a target on his son's back. By nightfall, the temporary camp was established near the roaring waters of the Silver River. The tension between the two factions was palpable. David's royal guards, clad in polished armor, stood in stark contrast to the Cindercrest fighters, who moved silently in muted leathers, their eyes suspicious and feral. Luna emerged from the Cindercrest command tent just as David finished assigning the first patrol. She looked exhausted, the shadows under her eyes more pronounced in the flickering torchlight. I agreed to a joint defense, Alpha David, she said as she approached, keeping a careful distance. Not an occupation. Keep your men on the west side of the perimeter. The rogues won't respect an imaginary line in the dirt, Luna. David countered softly, gesturing for his guards to step back. They were alone by the central fire pit. We are perfectly capable of defending our side, she replied stubbornly, crossing her arms over her chest. David looked at her, truly looked at her. Beneath the tough exterior of the emissary, he could see the girl who used to fall asleep reading in his library. He longed to reach out, to smooth the worry line from her forehead, but he knew the gesture would be rejected. What is his name? David asked, his voice barely louder than the crackling fire. Luna stiffened. She glanced around, ensuring no one was within earshot. Stop asking. It won't change anything. I have a right to know his name. You have no rights here, she hissed, stepping closer, her eyes blazing with a fierce, protective light. He is my son. He belongs to Cindercrest. He knows nothing of you, and he never will. You are the alpha of a neighboring pack, that is all. I am his father. Biology does not make a father, David, she said, the words striking with lethal precision. Presence does. Comfort does. Choosing them above all else does. You made your choice 4 years ago. Before he could answer, a piercing howl shattered the night air. It came from the north, from the direction of the Cindercrest outer settlement. Luna's face drained of color. No, she whispered. The settlement. They hit the decoy caravan to draw our fighters here. She didn't wait for his orders. She sprinted toward the tree line, shifting into a magnificent, silver-furred wolf mid-stride. Marcus, David roared, drawing his blade. Take the eastern flank. We move now. As he ran into the dark forest, following the path of the silver wolf, the political games and boundary disputes vanished entirely. Only one terrifying thought remained. His son was out there, in the dark. The forest was a chaotic blur of shadows, blood, and desperate violence. The rogues had bypassed the military camp and struck the vulnerable outer ring of the Cindercrest settlement, a cluster of wooden cabins where the non-combatants, the elders, and the children resided. David tore through the underbrush, his sword an extension of his own arm. He moved with a brutal, terrifying efficiency, cutting down any rogue wolf that crossed his path. He didn't bother to coordinate with Marcus or his own guards. His instincts had taken over completely. He had to find Luna. He had to find the child. Flames licked at the thatched roofs of the cabins, casting a hellish, flickering orange glow over the battlefield. The air was thick with the scent of smoke, ozone, and copper. He spotted the silver wolf fighting near the center of the settlement. Luna was surrounded by 3 massive rogues, her movements a desperate spinning dance of teeth and claws. She was holding her own, but she was outmatched by their sheer size. David let out a deafening roar, a sound that commanded absolute submission, and charged into the fray. He tackled the largest rogue, his blade finding its mark with ruthless precision. Together, he and Luna moved with an eerie synchronized grace, a remnant of their shared past. Within moments, the immediate threat around them was neutralized. Luna shifted back to her human form, breathing heavily, her leather armor torn at the shoulder. She didn't look at him. Her panicked eyes were scanning the burning cabins. "The evacuation tent," she gasped, pointing toward a large canvas structure near the edge of the woods. They were supposed to move them to the evacuation tent. A heavy crash sounded from that exact direction, followed by the terrified screams of women and children. David didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the tent, Luna right beside him. As they burst through the canvas flaps, the scene inside was pure chaos. A massive rogue had broken through the rear wall, cornering a group of huddled figures. The rogue raised a heavily clawed hand, preparing to strike the closest target. A small figure crouched defensively over an even smaller bundle. David vaulted over an overturned table, driving his shoulder into the rogue's chest. They crashed through the side of the tent, rolling out into the muddy, rain-soaked earth. The fight was brutal and short. Driven by a primal, protective fury he had never known, David subdued the attacker, leaving him unconscious in the dirt. Chest heaving, chest covered in mud and ash. David turned back toward the torn opening of the tent. The smoke was clearing slightly. Luna was already inside, kneeling on the ground. She had her arms wrapped tightly around a small child, her face buried in his dark, messy hair. She was murmuring frantic, soothing words, checking him for injuries. Slowly, David approached. The rest of the battle seemed to fade into a dull, distant ringing. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, painful rhythm. Sensing his approach, the little boy pulled his face away from his mother's shoulder and peered over her arm. David stopped dead in his tracks. The boy looked to be about 3, maybe 4 years old. He had Luna's soft jawline and her stubborn chin. But as the child looked up at him, the flickering firelight caught his eyes. They were a deep, turbulent gray, the exact color of a storm rolling over the mountains, the exact color of David's own eyes. The child blinked, his little brow furrowing in confusion as he stared at the tall, bloodied man standing before them. "Mama," the boy whispered, his voice trembling slightly. "Are the bad men gone?" "Yes, Leo," Luna choked out, her tears finally spilling over, mixing with the soot on her cheeks. She pulled him tighter against her chest, shielding him from view. "The bad men are gone. You're safe." "Leo." David fell to his knees in the mud, unable to support his own weight. He stared at the small, terrified boy who held his eyes, his blood, his legacy. The silence between the 3 of them was louder than the battle raging in the distance. The secret was out in the open, raw and undeniable, shifting the very foundation of their world. The smoldering ruins of the outer settlement cast long, jagged shadows across the muddy ground. The heavy rain had finally reduced the raging fires to thick plumes of white smoke, leaving behind a bitter chill that settled deep into the bones. David remained exactly where he was, kneeling in the ruined evacuation tent, the damp earth soaking through his trousers. He could not tear his gaze away from the small boy huddled against Luna's chest. "Leo?" His son, the boy, peeked over Luna's shoulder once more. His tempestuous gray eyes wide with lingering fear, yet shimmering with an innocent curiosity. He looked at David not as a powerful alpha, nor as a stranger, but simply as the man who had stopped the monster in the dark. "You need to leave, David," Luna whispered, her voice trembling but laced with an ironclad resolve. She smoothed Leo's messy hair, shielding his face from David's intense stare. "The danger has passed. Your men are securing the perimeter. Go back to your camp." "I am not going anywhere," David replied, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. He slowly rose to his feet, his massive frame dominating the torn space of the tent. The physical exhaustion of the battle was completely eclipsed by the adrenaline of revelation. "He is my blood, Luna. You can no longer pretend otherwise. The truth is standing right here in the ash. He is a child, not a piece of territory to be claimed," she shot back, her eyes flashing with a fierce maternal warning. "He does not know you. To him, you are just a soldier. Do not confuse him. Do not break his world just because yours has suddenly shattered." David took a slow breath, forcing his primal instincts to quiet down. She was right. He could not simply march in and demand a father's place after 4 years of absence, regardless of the deception that kept him away. "I will not frighten him," David promised softly, his tone completely devoid of its usual command. "But I am not leaving this settlement. Not tonight. Not tomorrow." Before Luna could argue further, the sound of heavy boots sloshing through the mud interrupted them. Marcus appeared at the torn entrance, his armor streaked with soot and blood. He took in the scene, David's rigid posture, Luna's defensive crouch, and the small boy with eyes that perfectly mirrored his alpha's. Marcus froze, the unspoken realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "Alpha," Marcus said carefully, averting his eyes from the child out of respect. "The rogues are dead or scattered. But there is a complication. An escort has just arrived at the perimeter. Lady Elena is here." David's jaw tightened. The collision of his two worlds was happening faster than he could control. He looked at Luna, seeing the immediate spike of anxiety in her posture. "Keep the healers moving," David ordered Marcus, his eyes never leaving Luna. "And bring my mate to the command tent. Keep her away from the civilian perimeter." By the time the sun began to breach the horizon, painting the smoky sky in the bruised shades of purple and gray, the command tent was a suffocating space. Elena stood near the center table, her immaculate traveling cloak entirely out of place amidst the mud and blood. She looked flawlessly composed, but her emerald eyes were sharp, missing nothing. "A rogue attack on a neutral settlement," Elena began, her voice crisp and cool in the tense air. "And the Alpha King himself abandons his guard to play the hero in the dirt. You are covered in blood, David." "It is handled," David said, washing his hands in a tin basin. The water turned a murky crimson. "Why did you leave the estate? It is not safe here." "I came because my husband is acting recklessly," Elena replied, stepping closer. "And because rumors travel faster than horses. Silas sent a missive the moment you left. He claims you are jeopardizing our pack's security for a phantom." "Silas oversteps," David growled, turning to face her. "Does he?" Elena challenged quietly. She walked past him, parting the tent flap just a fraction to look out into the recovering camp. "Because from where I stand, it appears you are willing to burn down the alliances we built for the sake of the Cinder Crest emissary." She paused, her gaze locking onto something in the distance. Through the gap, she could see the medical triage area. Luna was there, bandaging a wounded fighter. Standing right beside her, holding a roll of clean linen, was a small boy with dark hair. Elena went incredibly still. The silence in the tent stretched until it felt fragile, ready to shatter. She watched the boy look up, the morning light catching the unmistakable, turbulent gray of his eyes. Slowly, Elena let the tent flap fall closed. She turned back to David, her expression unreadable, a masterclass in emotional control. "I see," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of a falling guillotine. "It seems you found your phantom, David, and he has your eyes." For a long moment, the only sound in the command tent was the distant crackle of dying fires and the grim murmurs of the healers outside. David braced himself for the explosion. He expected Elena to shout, to demand retribution for the humiliation, or to threaten political ruin. He expected the wrath of a betrayed mate. Instead, Elena walked slowly back to the wooden table, her movements deliberate and terrifyingly calm. She pulled off her velvet gloves, setting them down next to a map of the territories. "A child," Elena stated, her voice devoid of any theatrical emotion. "An heir, hidden away for 4 years while we spent countless nights debating the succession line." "How long have you known?" "Since yesterday," David answered honestly. He felt a profound sense of failure, not just to Luna, but to Elena as well. He had dragged her into a life built on a foundation of secrets. "I found her journal. She left on the night of the ascension to protect him." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down at the map, tracing the river boundary with a manicured fingernail. "She protected him from me. She assumed I would view a bastard child as a threat to my own future offspring, a political complication." "She was terrified, Elena. She was alone." "She was remarkably astute," Elena corrected, looking up. There was no malice in her eyes, only a chilling pragmatism. A hidden heir fractures a pack. It divides loyalty. Silas and the traditionalists would have torn the child away from her, and they would have used him to manipulate you. She made the tactically sound choice. David stared at her, genuinely surprised by her cold, analytical assessment of the situation. "You are not angry." "Oh, I am furious, David," Elena said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. "But my anger is not directed at a mother protecting her cub. It is directed at the fools who believe they can manipulate my court." She reached inside her heavy cloak and produced a sealed leather tube. She tossed it onto the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "I did not ride out here solely because of rumors," Elena revealed, her posture straightening. "I came because I found a discrepancy in the northern trade ledgers. The rogue incursions? They were not random. They were heavily funded. Someone has been paying mercenaries to destabilize the border, specifically targeting the Cinder Crest territory." David felt a cold dread pool in his stomach. He stepped forward, breaking the wax seal on the tube and pulling out the tightly rolled parchment. His eyes scanned the names, the dates, the movement of silver. "Silas," David breathed, the betrayal burning hot in his throat. He wanted the Silver River access, and he despised the idea of a new, progressive pack settling on our borders. Elena explained smoothly. "He orchestrated the attacks to wipe them out, knowing you would be too distracted by the emissary to see the trap. He hoped she would die in the crossfire." The realization that his own elder had arranged an attack that nearly killed his son sent a blinding wave of rage through David. His eyes flashed a brilliant, unnatural gold. "I need to speak with her," Elena said suddenly, breaking through his rising fury. David blocked her path instantly. "No, you will not go near them." Elena offered a sharp, humorless smile. Do not mistake me for a jealous maiden, David. I am the lady of this pack, and I am about to offer her something you cannot. Without waiting for his permission, Elena moved past him, leaving the tent. David followed closely, his muscles coiled, ready to intervene. Elena walked straight through the mud toward the triage area. The Cinder Crest fighters tensed, their hands dropping to their weapons, but Elena ignored them entirely. Luna stood up as Elena approached, instinctively stepping in front of Leo, shielding him from the regal woman in the immaculate cloak. The two women stared at each other, a silent collision of two vastly different worlds. Emissary, Elena said, her tone perfectly polite. Lady Elena, Luna replied, her voice steady, though her hands trembled slightly against her sides. I will not waste time with pleasantries, Elena said quietly, ensuring her voice did not carry past the immediate circle. Your son is in danger. The attack tonight was orchestrated by a member of our own High Council, Silas. Luna's eyes widened in shock. Your own people? Politics is a bloody game, Elena said dismissively. Silas will be executed for treason by nightfall. But the traditionalists in the pack will not easily accept a suddenly discovered heir. Nor will they accept an alpha whose focus is hopelessly divided. Elena stepped half a pace closer, her emerald eyes boring into Luna's. David's heart has always been a ghost town. I knew that when I married him. We are a brilliant alliance, but we are not mates. I will not rule beside a king whose soul is buried in the woods. Luna blinked, completely disarmed by the raw, pragmatic truth. What are you saying? I am stepping down, Elena declared softly, the magnitude of the words hanging heavy in the damp air. I am dissolving the mating bond on grounds of unresolvable differences. I will return to my father's territory in the south with my dignity intact. But I require a guarantee. What guarantee? Luna asked, her grip on Leo's shoulder tightening. That you will not let the council tear him apart, Elena said, glancing briefly at David, who stood frozen in shock. He is a good leader, but he is a fool when it comes to you. If you are going to take my place, emissary, you must ensure the pack does not fracture. You must rule them, not just hide from them. Elena didn't wait for an answer. She offered a single, graceful nod, turned on her heel, and walked back toward her waiting carriage, a queen dictating her own flawless exit. The execution of Silas was swift, devoid of ceremony, and absolutely terrifying. David did not delegate the task. He stood before the assembled elders and the remaining royal guard, the damning ledgers laid bare for all to see. When Silas tried to protest, citing the purity of the pack and the danger of the Cinder Crest outsiders, David silenced him with a roar that shook the remaining leaves from the trees. Treason against our borders is treason against the crown, David had declared, his voice echoing through the valley. But orchestrating the murder of innocent children is an abomination. There is no trial for monsters. By sunset, the traitor was dealt with, and Elena's carriage was already a small speck on the southern horizon. The political landscape of the pack had been utterly decimated and violently reshaped in less than 24 hours. David walked away from the council encampment, his boots heavy, his heart a chaotic drumbeat against his ribs. The air was clearing, the stars beginning to pierce through the lingering veil of smoke. He crossed the invisible boundary line into the Cinder Crest territory, making no effort to hide his approach. He found Luna sitting on a fallen log near the edge of the river, the rushing water masking the sounds of the camp. Leo was asleep, wrapped securely in a thick wool blanket, his small head resting heavily against her lap. David stopped a few paces away, suddenly unsure of his footing. He was the Alpha, a man who commanded armies. Yet standing before this woman and the sleeping child, he felt entirely powerless. "Is it done?" Luna asked quietly, not looking up. She continued to stroke Leo's dark hair, her touch impossibly gentle. "Silas is gone," David replied. "And Elena, she has left. The bond is being formally dissolved." Luna finally looked up, her expression a complex tapestry of exhaustion, relief, and lingering sorrow. "She is a formidable woman, David. You lost a powerful ally today." "I lost an ally," David agreed, taking a slow step closer. "But I realized I have been fighting a war I didn't actually want to win. I spent 4 years trying to build an impenetrable fortress, believing that if the walls were high enough, I wouldn't notice the emptiness inside." He slowly sank to his knees, ignoring the damp earth, positioning himself so he was at eye level with her and the sleeping boy. Up close, he could see the faint rhythm of Leo's breathing, the way his small hands curled into the fabric of Luna's shirt. An overwhelming, suffocating wave of love crashed over him, stealing his breath. "I am angry, Luna," David admitted, his voice rough with unshed tears. "I am angry that I missed his first steps. I am angry that I missed his first words. I am angry that you felt you had to face the terror of the world alone." Luna's eyes filled with tears, her defensive walls finally beginning to crack. "I wanted to tell you," she choked out, a single tear slipping down her soot-stained cheek. "Every day, I looked at him and saw you. But I was so afraid. Afraid they would take him, afraid you would resent him for complicating your reign. Look at me," David pleaded softly. He reached out, his large, calloused hand hovering just inches from her face, waiting for permission. Slowly, Luna leaned into his palm. He closed his eyes at the contact, the warmth of her skin grounding him in reality. "There is no reign without you," David said, opening his eyes to meet hers. "I do not want to force you into a court you despise. I do not want to tear Leo from the family he knows. So, I am giving you a choice." He reached to his collar and unfastened the heavy gold pin that marked him as Ghost Alpha King. He laid it gently on the log beside her. "If you wish to remain with Cindercrest, I will step down. Marcus is ready. I will relinquish the title and come to you as a man, not a king. I will earn my place in your pack." He paused, his thumb brushing away another tear from her cheek. "Or we tear down the borders entirely. We merge the territories. We build a new council, a new pack, where progress and strength stand together. We rule as equals. But whatever happens, I am not leaving you again." Luna looked at the gold pin resting on the wood, then at the man kneeling in the mud before her. He was not the ambitious young Alpha who had chosen duty over love 4 years ago. He was a father, shattered and rebuilt by truth, offering her his entire world. Leo shifted in his sleep, letting out a soft sigh, his small hand uncurling to rest against David's knee. David froze, holding his breath as he looked down at the tiny fingers resting against him. A tentative, beautiful smile broke through Luna's tears. She didn't pick up the pin. Instead, she reached out and placed her hand over David's, lacing their fingers together above their sleeping son. "We have a lot of work to do, Alpha," she whispered, the familiar scent of pine and rain finally washing away the ash. "The borders come down tomorrow. The story of the Alpha King and his lost emissary serves as a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in the walls we build, but in the vulnerability we are willing to embrace." David and Luna's journey from heartbreak to a fractured reunion, highlights the enduring power of family, the heavy cost of political ambition, and the profound courage it takes to forgive. They dismantled a broken system to forge a new legacy, proving that sometimes you must lose everything to discover what is truly worth fighting for. If you enjoyed this cinematic journey of secrets, sacrifice, and redemption, please consider leaving a like, sharing the story with fellow fiction lovers, and subscribing for more immersive, dramatic tales. Your support helps bring more thrilling worlds to life.